So if there's one thing that's been ever present in British politics for the last 30 years, is that young people just don't vote Tory. Now, of course, it's been getting worse and worse over time. In a post-2008 world, and ever since David Cameron, where David Cameron just continued cutting stuff from young people, getting rid of the maintenance grants for nurses, increasing student fees, increased austerity, taking money out of the pockets of all of the things that young people need to be able to get on in life in terms of public services. On top of that, continually depressing wages by running supply-side labour market policies that predominantly affected young people. But I think the biggest place in which the Tories lose young people's votes in this country is around housing. Housing is a gigantic issue for young people. Rents have spiralled in price. There's no social housing. It was only in 2011 that private rents overtook social rents, and they've ballooned ever since, right? Continuing the Blair legacy of buy-to-let landlordism being a very lucrative way for people from the older right-to-buy generations to make a load of money, and young people don't get any of that. They don't get the social housing, but they get the sky-high rents, and it's paid to people who already have loads of money in the form of landlords. And on top of that, continual loose monetary policy, essentially, all of that time, because they've not engaged in any expansionary policy to be able to stimulate growth, because we've had low growth in terms of actual economic growth in this country for the last 13 years, very, very stagnant growth. But what has continued growing because of this loose monetary policy is house prices. All the extra quantitative easing that got put into the financial sector got put into assets, right? Assets have inflated loads in the last 13 years, making the already rich richer with all of this free money they were given by the state. But wages haven't gone up. Consumer prices have stayed pretty stable over that period. But wages stayed low and assets increased in price, housing being one of those chief assets, because one of the most important parts of every single election in this country is around housing policy. I talked about this earlier. The reason why Rishi Sunak is losing is because Liz Truss screwed up the mortgages of the people in this country. And the biggest changing voting demographic from where they voted in 2019 to now is people with mortgages. You screw up people's house prices, you lose the election. It happened to John Major with Black Wednesday. It happened to Tony Blair in 2008, right? Or Gordon Brown, I guess, more likely in 2008. And that's what happens. You lose an election if you screw up house prices, and that's what happened to Liz Truss. So house prices have slightly come down a little bit since the Liz Truss, but they've started increasing again as more people are buying with cash. We looked at this in the FT a couple of months back. The biggest buyers of new homes are cash buyers. People like BlackRock are buying up housing. TSB are buying housing. Private investors are buying housing because they know that it's an ever-appreciating asset, something that they know they can put loads of money into, increase the price ad infinitum, and then make sure they get a return on their investment. But you know who gets screwed over when house prices increase? It's young people. Young people get screwed over when house prices increase. They get screwed over in two ways. First of all, it makes them even harder to get onto the housing ladder in the first place, to actually get that property wealth as assets increase, and the people who own the assets are more the rich people, and people from not just younger backgrounds, but from poorer backgrounds find it harder to get any actual social mobility, which housing is the best way of that in this country. Getting on the housing ladder is the best way of actually accruing an asset that you need, that everybody needs, right? And as those prices increase, not only do young people get priced out, but the poorer get priced out as well, right? To an even larger degree. So these are two groups that are really adversely affected by 13 years of loose policy on the housing market from the Conservative Party, just to keep a very, very small swing voting demographic happy with ever-increasing house prices. Because they can't really go down because you lead to negative equity, but they've just absolutely spiralled and spiralled and spiralled because of the current loose policy from the Bank of England during the Conservatives' tenure. Deliberately so, whilst they kept austerity everywhere else, manufacturing a 13-year liquidity trap in this country. All that's done is make housing more expensive for young people to buy and for poor people to buy. But on top of that, rents then increase, because rental prices are based upon the prices of the house that you're renting. The availability of rental accommodation means that prices are going to increase over time for renting. And as rents go up, it makes it even harder to accrue a deposit as your wages stay stagnant. So you're even less likely to get on the housing ladder, and even more so if you're poor. So that is the situation the Conservatives have got themselves into, where no young people will ever vote for them. Probably never ever again, actually, because they're getting more left-wing over time. John Byrne-Murdoch from the Financial Times did good analysis on this, and the millennials are actually getting more left-wing as they age, despite what you would think would be the conventional wisdom on this, because they're just so sick of neoliberal policy, so sick of being disenfranchised continually by conservative policy on the economy, that they're trying to woo them. So they've thought up some things around the housing policy that they can use to woo over young voters who won't vote for them, because they know that these people are just going to destroy them in the next election. Now, given what we now know about house prices, affordability, and what's good for young people and what's not, what they've decided is that they're going to have help for first-time buyers, which is going to be through a help to buy scheme, potentially, by considering bringing back help to buy, which was shut for new entrants last year. Now, I don't need to tell any of you what happens when you put more liquidity into an asset where the supply stays very similar. I don't need to tell anybody what happens when you massively increase the amount of money going into a sector whilst not increasing the supply. Prices go up, don't they? Right? So this isn't actually a policy that's going to help young people very much. It'll help posh young people who can siphon money out of the bank of mum and dad that they can then use to put forward towards a cheap deposit using Help to Buy, right? They'll be helped loads by this. But the extra liquidity being put into the market will push up prices even further, increasing the price of deposits. It will increase the rents for everybody else who can't have mummy and daddy help them pay for their deposit. So not only will this only help a tiny section of young people, it'll also make it even worse for the poor parts of society and only make the problem worse. You say, well, then what? They might increase supply. We already know what Theresa Villiers wants, right? Theresa Villiers and all of her amendments to try and ensure that we don't have any housing targets, they've been scrapped by the Conservatives, been scrapped by the Lib Dems at their conference as well, but it's also been scrapped by the Conservatives. We're not actually getting new houses being built either. So while you constrain the supply and pump even more liquidity into the market, it's just going to continue increasing the bloody house prices, which makes it even harder for people who are not from privileged backgrounds to be able to get onto the housing ladder. So even then, this may be a policy that might win over like 5% of really well-off young people. But even then, who out of those young people isn't already voting Tory? If you're the kind of person who's a millennial who has enough money from the bank of mum and dad to be able to put towards Help to Buy towards a mortgage, you're already voting Tory. Who are you winning over with this? Just build some bloody houses. Just build some houses. The people in this country are desperate to build houses at this point. The younger generations need houses to be built. You cannot just Help to Buy forever. You can't just pour even more liquidity into the housing market and not expect the prices to continue increasing ad infinitum whilst you constrain the supply through not having housing targets and continue capitulating towards an NIMBYs. It's so catastrophically stupid policy, but of course, it's just, again, a thing that they are trying to woo the electorate with at the election, which doesn't actually work in real terms. Like, I'm not against bribing people with policy. That's how politics is supposed to work. People want good policy, so you offer them good policy, and then they vote for you. Well, the policy that would be beneficial to them. That's how politics is supposed to work, where you're offering to the electorate is things that they think will be good for them. At the very least, have policy that will actually do what you want it to do and actually help people. And this won't do anything. It's terrible. Just build the houses. You cannot make young people happy by getting them on the housing ladder whilst also keeping all the people who already have houses happy at the same time, right? That's not how economics works. And these people know that's how economics works. It's just a stupid policy that's not going to work at all. They just have to bite the bullet and recognise that if you want to win over young people by making housing affordable, you're going to have to disenfranchise a bunch of boomers who own lots of property. But they won't do that because that's their core voter base. So they're going to continue with failed Help to Buy policy, which again just further inflates house prices, rather than just building some council houses, just building some new state-owned housing. Bring the rents down. Once the rents come down because you increase the supply of rental housing through the power of the state, they'll be able to have enough money saved up to be able to afford the deposit anyway. They can't do it because they're renting at the moment. Giving a very tiny section of posh young people extra money to combine with mummy and daddy's money to buy a new house does not solve this problem whatsoever. And no one's going to vote for them because they're already voting for you already if they're doing that. Every young person who is in rental accommodation at the moment, they're not going to be helped by this policy, and they're all the ones who are all voting Labour. It's such a stupid policy. I cannot stress just how much I'm sick of them just not building the houses, because we have an issue with supply in terms of not enough houses themselves, but also not enough rooms in existing houses too, because the other policy you have to do alongside this is get rid of short-term rentals. Airbnb, ban it, get rid of it, gone. Far be it for me to praise the SNP too much, but at least the SNP have decided that short-term rentals have to go. Short-term rentals, they just have to go. You look at Prague right now, the centre of Prague, all of the residential units in the centre of Prague, it's all Airbnb. It's a wasteland now. Nobody lives in these areas anymore. People keep saying, the housing crisis is a function of increased population, and there is some of that, to be fair. I'm not going to dismiss that entirely. But huge amounts of a housing crisis is because there's empty space where what should be residential property is being used for what hotels should be used for. Build more houses, cap some rents, have a bigger state sector for housing, and get rid of short-term rentals. This Help to Buy stuff doesn't work. It's never worked. It didn't work the 400 times you tried it before. It's not going to work this time. Just stop it. I beg you. Just some sensible housing policy, please, from somebody. Because on the Conservative side, we have just throwing money at the problem, hoping it'll go away by giving money to already rich young people. And on the Labour side, we have just deregulate everything and the market shall provide. No new money for council housing, no rent caps, no nothing, no plans to tackle short-term lets. Just give the private sector free rein to turn our country into Coruscant. I really do despair. I really do despair at this country sometimes. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.